I will start with you, Mr. Jackson. If you're elected in 4 years, if you're elected for another 4-year term, what does the city look like in terms of, parks and streets and police? And please keep your answers brief.
Well, that's helpful. It looks better. It looks better because in terms of parks and playgrounds, we invest heavily in that so far, and we'll continue that investment. And with passage of issue 32 in restricted income tax, it gives us greater capacity to borrow more money. In terms of police, we will be bringing on additional police officers, increased overall number in a very practical way. What's a practical number? Based on just a practical application of how it's done. And in terms of streets, we've already invested. We've gone to a citywide approach that looks at worst first, and through a pavement management study, and we've been putting about $10 to $12 million into that each year, and you can see the improvement there. That's on the residential research. And then when we get into issue 1, the state pays 80%, we pay 20%. There will be a lot more of that happening, and we probably will try to increase the amount of money we put in street resurfacing as we go forward again, because our capacity to borrow has increased through the restricted income tax.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Reed, what would if you become mayor, what would the city of Cleveland look like in 4 years?
Well, let me first of all thank you for this opportunity to be before the editorial board. I've had this opportunity on more than one occasion as a council person, and now I have the privilege as a candidate for the mayor to sit here, and I definitely appreciate that very much for you taking time to give me this opportunity. City looks safer, first of all, much safer than it looks today. Clearly, we're not going to be on a streak of 4 consecutive years of 100+ homicides. I don't look to run or to be in office for 12 years, but look to not have a record of over 1,200 homicides in the 12 years if I was to get elected and serve for 12 years, to have a record that says that in my 12 years I average 100 homicides per year. So clearly it's going to look safer. It's going to look even. The fact that you look at all the billions of dollars that have been spent in the city of Cleveland, and when one mayor left after, as you know, only 2 mayors have ever served 12 years in the history of the city of Cleveland, and one mayor, when they left, every ward, every community, every neighborhood, all 34 were prospering and moving forward. That means 100%. The other mayor that served 12 years can look, and we all know that it's about 4 or 5 neighborhoods that are thriving and moving forward. It's less than 15%. So it will clearly be in a sense of evenness, that we know what those neighborhoods are: downtown, Ohio City, Tremont, Detroit Shoreway, and University Circle. And those are pretty much the only neighborhoods that are moving forward right now. So it's going to look different in the sense that we're going to take the tack that every ward, every community, every neighborhood, and all the people who live in those neighborhoods deserve to participate in the revitalization. And therefore, we're not going to walk around until every ward and every community and every neighborhood and those people in those neighborhoods feel the quality of life for them has gotten better because I was the council, because I was the mayor of the city of Cleveland.
All right, let me press back a little bit harder on that. You floated the idea that there should be 400 cops hired for the city of Cleveland. We've done, pretty rigorous reporting that showed that that is just not financially viable. So what's your concrete plan? If it doesn't mean 400 cops, or it doesn't mean 250, which is a number also that's been floated, what's your concrete plan to change the crime that keeps happening in our neighborhoods?
Well, we say that because from the beginning I've said that we need 400 police officers. And when I first started saying we need 400 police officers, people looked at me and said, that's crazy, it's undoable, no way it's going to happen. Now look at the discussion we're having now. The discussion now is the police chief, the top cop in the city of Cleveland, says he needs 250. We've got a mayor who's now sending out pieces of literature that looks like me on the front that now says that he's going to hire 300. So the discussion now has gone from I'm crazy and we're never going to be able to do it to the top cop says we need 250. The mayor says we need 300, and I say 400. So now we're at least at a point now that we all can agree that we need more police officers. That 1,458 police officers are not getting the job done. And the fact that City Council, on my birthday, April 1st, actually approved the budget. And in that budget, it said that we have a budgeted amount of 1,601 police officers. And as we sit in this room today, we're 168 police officers below that budgeted amount. Not just any amount, the budgeted amount. So that means even if you just did the math, let's do simple math here. I don't need to find the money for 400 police officers. I need to find the money for 232 police officers. He doesn't need to find the money for 300 police officers. He only needs to find the money for 132 police officers. So the money is there. The question is, why haven't we done it?
All right, let me stop you there.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson is here, and I'm sure he's willing to respond to that. So now numbers being floated of 250. What's your sense of, and I kind of want to get even beyond the number of cops.
Right.
What needs to be done about crime?
Well, crime is said often is a symptom. It's a symptom of something. And you have to deal with the symptom, and we look to law enforcement to deal with that symptom. But the underlying cause of crime, particularly violent crime, is more of a social, economic issue. And that's why over the years we've invested heavily in our schools, in our school system reform, while we've invested in economic development that created jobs. And as it created jobs, how do we have a better inclusion in that job creation with Clevelanders, the Fannie Lewis Law and other activities in the contracting, the creation of wealth and the ownership, those kinds of things. These are the kind of basic things of society that you need to have in place if you're going to take away those conditions that leads to a negative or antisocial behavior. Of course, that's a longer range strategy, and we work on that. But in the meantime, we work on law enforcement, and we work on law enforcement in a way that is strategic and has tactics associated with, so we get the best out of what we have. But in terms of the number of police officers, that will be determined by the chief in terms of how he utilizes what we can afford and what we're able to do in a very practical way. This is not about having a conversation about additional police officers. The passage of issue 32 allowed us to have that conversation. Without the passage of issue 32, we were talking about how we're not laying off 200 and something police officers. So that began the conversation, the passage of issue 32. In a very practical way, what we're doing, we put on a class at the end of this, that is in now in Columbus. They'll be graduating in February. We're going to use Tri-C, Columbus, and our internal training for next year. We're going to have 5 classes on. We believe out of those 5 classes, we will probably get around 250, hopefully 3, but 250 graduates. But with attrition, we'll probably net about 170 police officers. That will be determined how they're deployed and how they're used in order to affect crime will be determined by the chief of police.
All right.
Can I answer the question, because I never got a chance to answer the question where we get the money from?
Briefly.
Okay, we're going to get the money from the same place. The chief's going to get his 250, and the mayor's going to get his 300. We're going to take it out of the general fund. But I mean, yesterday, Bob Higgs just put, it was just in the paper this morning, or cleveland.com, I don't see the paper. But the question you got to ask yourself, and he writes right here, he said, that right now, Cleveland City Council approved $8 million for demolition to dilapidated housing. That's the headline. The headline should read that the city of Cleveland now will not hire more police officers this year because the additional $8 million was made available for money earmarked for specific programs in the budget that now appear won't be needed this year, said City Council President Kevin Kelly. For example, a police training class that was expected to be held near the end of this year likely will fall into next year's budget. Those are police officers that should have been hired, that were budgeted to be hired on April the 1st, that should have been going through a class, that now we're saying that the headline reads that we now have $8 million to demolish houses, where the headline should say we had $8 million to hire more police in the city of Cleveland, to make the city of Cleveland safer. So now we're not gonna do it. Then we're gonna take the $8 million and put it into demoing houses. That's the question that we must ask ourselves. What is the reluctancy of this administration to hire police officers?
Let's stop you right there.
And that's a misrepresentation. If what the council president said, if I've been listening to what the councilman read, is that there is a class on right now. That class will not graduate until February of next year. So it's not that we did not put the class on, the class is on. What he is saying is that as any time you attempt to ratchet up personnel, there's always a delay in that because of the way in which the hiring process works. And so if you hire somebody for half a year, you save half a year's salary. If you hire them 3/4 of a year in, you save 3/4. So we were able to cobble together enough money to go into additional demolition. So that is where this comes from. It's a misrepresentation to say that we didn't put on the class. The class is on now. They're in Columbus.
But you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways, people. You can't say that one of the reasons that we're able to hire police is because we passed, that the citizens of the city of Cleveland passed the income tax last year. It was passed last November. Last November. You started putting the budget together last November. You submitted the budget to the city council in January. You said you wanted 1,601 police officers on the street in that budget. We are now below that by 168 police officers. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that we saved the money because they didn't come on, and now we're gonna use the money in this way, when last November you said, people, if you give us additional funding, we're gonna hire more police officers. It just has not happened.
Well, and then I didn't say it both ways. What I'm answering your question, your misrepresentation, that we did put the class on. We put the class on.
All right, before we move on though, because we're talking about the dollars, and we're spending so much time talking about this tax, and whether it's for demolition or police, you voted against that tax increase last year, so.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, actually, Sharon.
Yes.
No, I did not.
According to the story I saw, you
I
did.
didn't vote, I supported it. The mayor and I went around the city of Cleveland.
No, we didn't, but you know how you supported in them divisions.
I supported it. My name's on the, every council person went through and said, we actually sent out literature saying to everybody. I had said that we should have did it a year before that. So that is completely wrong. I definitely supported it. I was a big supporter of it well before he announced it. I came to your editorial board, and what did I say? It was myself, Mike Polincic, and Jeff Johnson that sat in a room, and you asked the specific questions, should we increase the income tax? And I specifically said yes, and went out and endorsed it.
Sharon, read you this.
Okay, this is a story that we ran. It said, it's talking about the 2 to 2.5% on November 8th ballot. But Councilman Brian Casey, Martin Keene, and Zack Reed voted against the legislation, arguing that the city's plan for using the money is too heavy on city hall personnel. Doesn't do enough.
So you're saying you did not vote against putting that on the ballot?
No.
All right, we'll go double check. So, all right.
Alrighty. Going back to you again, Mr. Reed. Tamir's mother yesterday said, shame on you for accepting the police union's endorsement because it's a white nationalist organization that endorsed Trump. And it could be also said, which she didn't really go into, but that President Steve Loomis has been very divisive and very difficult to work with on the many community boards he's been in. And, you know, usually he sheds more heat than light on these kinds of things. Why accept that endorsement?
Because the endorsement wasn't a Steve Loomis endorsement. It was a CPP endorsement, CPPA endorsement.
All right, but they are obviously attached at the hip.
Yeah, but by a count of 27-0, where he had one vote. See, their issue is with Steve Loomis. My issue was with public safety. And they chose, there were two people that were running in this race. And they looked at both records and both plans. And they made a decision that my plan, to hire more police officers, to give them better equipment, to give them better resources, and to give them a raise was far better than my competitor. And they endorsed me.
All right, and no qualms about that, considering this is, I should say for the record, that Tamira Rice was a 12-year-old who was playing with a gun, and Steve Loomis has been kind of harshly critiqued that whole scenario.
Well, Steve Loomis has been harsh, using nice little politically correct words. Steve Loomis was wrong. And I've been on the floor of City Council saying that what happened to that 12-year-old little boy should have never happened. I've marched with Ms. Rice. I've cried with Ms. Rice. I've prayed with Ms. Rice. I felt the sympathy with Ms. Rice. What happened to that little boy should have never happened. One of the things that, a few of the things that the mayor and I do agree on is the fact that you cannot blame him, and I've said that. You cannot blame that 12-year-old little boy for what happened to him in that park. And on more than one occasion, you covered it. I've been critical of the CPPA as late as last year when they endorsed Donald Trump. Who was the only council person? Who was the only elected official to stand with the Black Shields? And you can call Lynn Hampton, and he'll tell you. He would say that one council person that stood with us constantly in support of the police. And on this issue of Donald Trump last year, it was Councilman Zack that stood there and said that this will be divisive. That this will be divisive, and therefore you should not endorse Donald Trump. And I even went further. I put it into a resolution and asked my colleagues on City Council to go on record saying that they should not endorse Donald Trump. So at times when they do the right thing, the police, I will say that it's good. When they are not doing the right thing, I will say that it's not good.
So you question their judgment when they endorse somebody like Donald Trump, but you'll champion their judgment when they endorse you.
It's not whether I'm questioning their judgment. I'm saying they're wrong. It's not questioning their judgment. That was a wrong thing to do, to question a person that has proven to be divisive throughout his campaign and throughout now his presidency. And I'm going to be mayor of the entire city of Cleveland. And my job is to bring people together. That's my job. And the only way that we are going to be able to move the city forward, where we need the safety forces, and we need safer communities, and we need safer neighborhoods, is if that everybody at least feels that they have a party in this. So you need to be working with the police officers, which I'll do. I need to work with the federal government, not to dismantle or water down the consent decree, of which I support, and to work with the citizens in the community. Because you cannot do what I want to do if you do not have a safe community. And you need your safety forces to be able to do that.
Okay. All right. A campaign question for you, Mr. Jackson. We recently reported that there will be a separate committee aimed at attacking Zack on the campaign trail. Just I'm going to put it out there. What's wrong with having a DUI, several DUIs, and running for mayor?
There's nothing wrong with having several DUIs and running for mayor. It becomes a choice of the voters of whether or not they believe that there's good judgment when in fact there are times when you have to have solid, sound judgment. So that's a choice to voters. There's nothing wrong with it.
All right.
There's nothing wrong with it.
There's a bigger issue here, in that this would be the first time ever dark money played into a city campaign. And while there's distance between dark money PACs and the campaign, the people behind this are people that have been longtime supporters of yours. With the huge increase in the campaign financing for this race, this would blow financing sky high.
Right.
You didn't comment on this. We were thinking that you might come out and say, no, I'd rather not see dark money. I'd rather see our campaign funding limits respected.
Look, I would tell you, first of all, I have no knowledge. If in fact they're doing what they do, then they do what they do. I'm not part of that. If in fact someone wants to say something negative about my opponent, you know, that's not part of what I do. I don't do that. I haven't done it in the past, and I don't intend to do it in the future. I do, however, will point out the fact. I know that when I was in the primary, I was the sole point of everybody's attack. I just sat up there and everybody attacked me. It didn't matter who it was, whether it was this councilman, that councilman, this business person, you know, you say. And so now there's between two of us. And I raise a legitimate issue around what would be a thing of a sense of judgment and taking responsibility. I am not in support of people who want to do negative things or undermine other people in that way, because I don't do that. I don't do that.
Will you disavow those people then?
Disavow, I've just said that I'm not in support of anybody or anything that it does that kind of, I have never done it in the past.
No, I guess I'm saying explicitly say that even though these attacks are on my behalf, you know, I do not want this kind of behavior to continue, whoever this may be on this committee and what they're doing.
Yeah, just said it.
And
Just
Mr.
say it.
Reed,
Well, one thing, I need to ask one question though. How is it that it's in his literature though?
You've also
Well, it's in the
been
literature.
criticizing the mayor for his age,
Right.
which was also striking. And so, wanted to hear
It's
your thoughts
legitimate.
about doing that.
Well, I mean, that was an off-the-cuff joke. I mean, if you listen to it, it was a total off-the-cuff joke. It was a joke centered on the fact that Lincoln and Douglas had a debate, and I'm not old enough to remember the Lincoln and Douglas debate because I'm not as old as he is. That's all it was. It was a totally off-the-cuff.
Well, I'd suggest
Joke.
you take my literature as being off the cuff around
Well,
DUI then.
Well,
That's
I think having a disease is not a joke.
Well, you know, and I
And
think
mine
getting
was
old is
clearly-
not a joke.
Well,
You know, and you know, if you're able to get there, you probably better understand and appreciate it. You know, you know, it's not good for the goose, not good. You know, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. If someone else would have come out and have been my opponent, then whatever issue that was legitimate, I would have raised it. Whether somebody lived in the city of Cleveland, where they had other kind of convictions, whether or not they were Republican or Democrats, you know, those kind of things, I would have raised it. You know, during the primary, I was the sole source of everybody's attack for whatever, whether it was about age or whatever it might be, right? And so I'm pretty sure that as it narrowed down, they were pretty sure that I would be one of the candidates. So they did their strategies based on that. Now I have one candidate before me, and that's Councilman Reed. And I raised what I believe a legitimate issue around judgment and accountability. Because this is the mayor's office. This is not the Boy Scouts or some other kind of organization where you don't have the kind of intense decision-making and the pressure and adversity that exists in this office, and there's a lot of pressure. And I believe that's a legitimate point to raise as people make their decisions. Do I personally dislike the councilman? No. Do I, you know, have I ever dogged him out about anything? No. But I do believe this is a legitimate concern.
So
And
you
if
think
it
it's a
wasn't-
legitimate concern, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
That I and many others are addicted to maybe drugs or alcohol or gambling, and it's proven that it's a full-fledged disease?
No.
And you believe?
No, I don't believe, I believe it's a legitimate concern, since I've had opportunity to deal with people who have been addicted and close to me, that I believe it's a legitimate concern to say that under certain circumstances and pressures and situations, that they always don't use best judgment. That's what I'm talking about. It is not the disease itself. It is the condition that of decision-making and judgment that I am concerned about and that I raise. It's not about the disease. I'm totally familiar with the disease.
So you don't believe that people can get help?
I'm not saying that. I'm totally familiar with the disease. I know people who have gotten help, and they function very well.
So you don't believe that when people go get help and they continue to get help in the rooms of AA and other rooms when they go in and get the help, that they now can function well in society?
Councilman, I have no problem against anybody with addiction. If I did, then it would be against having a problem against people I love. So I don't have any problem with people having an addiction. I do, however, have the experience. And I know that under certain circumstances and conditions, and particularly when it's very adverse with a lot of pressure, judgment comes into question and accepting responsibility comes into question.
So you don't?
That I know. It has nothing to do with the addiction. It has to do with a person who has a propensity to not be able to use proper judgment and accept responsibility for their actions.
But you know.
And Zack, I'm sorry.
Okay,
because
that's
we
right.
Go round and round, but I do want to kind of put on the table the question that, the mayor's kind of asking, which is, if you do become mayor, considering the fact that, you have struggled with this disease, it is a very high intense office, should the voters be worried about you if you accept this, if you win this job?
No.
And I believe that's the voters' choice. That's their choice.
Moving on to dirt bike tracks. Mayor,
Yes.
sorry, Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
It seems like it was a noble effort to help youngsters in the dirt bike culture practice their sport legally.
Mhm.
But why didn't your team do better homework? The park has environmental issues, there are liability issues, there are now, whole questions about whether or not this is a good idea.
Right.
What went wrong here?
Well, first of all, it's not a noble gesture. I think it's a very essential initiative that we have to do, considering the fact that this is not going away. It is not a phenomenon just in Cleveland, it's all over the country. So it's not noble, it's about an essential thing. We, however, did not do the proper homework up front, not in terms of environmental, because we knew there was an environmental problem and that was factored into the cost. It was more so around the noise level. As we began to research and talk to operators in regards to the kind of track that we were looking for that would be a professional competitive track on a national circuit, we found that the number of bikes associated with that in each race would be far more than what we had anticipated. So as we learned it through the process of pre-bids and having discussion with potential operators, we learned that with that, the decimal level is quite high, and in a densely populated area, it just simply doesn't work there. It doesn't work there. So what we're looking to is finding another site where we don't have the level of density. Now that's on the dirt bike track that is competitive. And we'll do the remediation because that's part of what we should be doing anyway, because now we have identified it. The other side to this is that we've also learned in that process that there's a distinct difference between those who would ride on dirt and those who do tricks and stunts on pavement. And that in some operators' mind, that should be separated. And we believe that we can use the trick riding and the stunt riding on pavement as special events, as we did about a year or so ago down at Muni Lot. And that would have little or no expense on the city, simply because it would be the sponsor of that special event. So that would help to have that type of riding, urban riding there, and then to have this other kind of professional dirt bike riding somewhere else.
Mr. Reed?
It's just a bad idea, and I'm glad he finally came to the same conclusion that
No, I
I came.
haven't come to that conclusion. I haven't come to that. I think it's a great idea. It is a great idea. It is, and I believe it's an essential initiative if we're going to address urban young people who are part of a culture that we're trying to interact with and bring them into, as you say, the cooperation and into having a stake into society. So you're misquoting again and you're misrepresenting again.
Mr. Reed, let me stop you there. So in a nation where there's lots of talk about over-criminalization, particularly of young black men, why not support something like the dirt bike culture, which a lot of these young men are flocking to?
Understand how we came to this conversation. We came to the conversation in the way that we were going to try to do something about public safety. And nothing in this proposal does, in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, does anything for public safety. So we can try to not characterize it in another way. When it was unveiled to the people of the city of Cleveland, it was a way to deal with the public safety, the
Which is,
unsafe.
again, a misrepresentation, but I'll let you finish.
So when you think about how it was unveiled to the people of the city of Cleveland, this was going to take this unsafe thing off the streets of the city of Cleveland. That's how it was unveiled to the people of the city of Cleveland.
And again, that's a misrepresentation. It was unveiled and talked about in the context of how do we create a better relationship between that group of people where the police normally would be in conflict with, and had created a better relationship, and also provide that group with an opportunity to become part of a profession that exists in the United States that is at a level. If you ever watch motocross on TV, they fill up stadiums of thousands of people. There's millions of dollars in this sport. So it's a misrepresentation. That was the context of it, and I've stated it, and I'll continue to state that it gives opportunity. It helps in police and community relations, particularly with those groups of young people who would be in complete conflict with the police at all times.
And understand, if we had done our homework, you would have known that it's a totally different thing than going to the Q Arena and seeing these motorbikes go through the queue with the noise. You would have knew then that this noise should not be behind the people who live in public housing, should not be behind the people who live in subsidized housing, should not be behind the people who live in the houses along the North Broadway area. You would have known then. We wouldn't have needed to do studies. Secondly, I'm all for helping to bring the people in our community and the safety forces together. That's why you've seen I've had not once, not two, but 3 occasions what we call solution summits. And one of the solution summit was to bring Cure Violence to the city of Cleveland. And they came to the city of Cleveland. And they talked about what you called novel and I called working, ways to bring the police, people who are formerly incarcerated. As you know, I have a program going forward. Bob has come out and looked at that program, bringing where we take formerly incarcerated men and women and put them in our community, learning and giving them a trade, how to be roofers, how to be carpenters, how to be painters, how to be landscapers. So I have a way of bringing the police and the people in our community together. It's just not about spending $2.4 million on a dirt bike track that 95% of the people in the city of Cleveland, and I'm being very conservative with that number, won't even use.
Let me stop you right
So do
there.
you think there should be a space for dirt bike riders in Cleveland, or they should not ride in Cleveland at all?
Hey,
I
what's
think-
your solution for the dirt bike problem?
I think there needs to be a conversation. I think there needs to be a conversation with the people in the city of Cleveland, and let us have a full-scale conversation about which way should we do this, if we choose to do this. Should not be having a conversation in one area of the city of Cleveland where they made the decision that was going to affect everybody in the city of Cleveland.
Councilman, you have to be a leader sometime or another. I mean, I just can't help it. You have to take responsibility for something sometime and lead sometime. You just can't skirt the doggone issue every time. You know, you just can't do it. You have to make the decisions. And yes, when you make decisions, you're going to make decisions, and they're not always going to be 100% like you thought they were going to be, and you tweak those decisions. But it's the goal and objective still remains the same. How do we create an environment where we have better relationship between the public and the police, particularly those groups of people who the police are in constant conflict with? How do we do that? How do we provide opportunity for young people to be involved in a professional sport that gives them an opportunity because they have the talent to be part of the wealth that could be created through that? How do we then pull them into our society and have them part of a constructive way of addressing the issues that we face every day? How do we meet with them and talk to them about, look, what is it that you would like? What is your problem? Why are you doing this? And then once you do all that, those who just refuse to do what they're supposed to do, then you do what you do. You cite them, you tow their bikes, you put them in jail, whatever that may be. But you gotta take responsibility sometime about something. We just can't keep talking the world away. Part of our problem is we talk the world away. And we have great conversations about whatever it may be. But when are you gonna do something?
Okay, so-
When are you actually going to take a stand and actually do something that is substantive, that will address the issues that we face in this city? That is relevant. It is relevant to me.
So I made several decisions, Mr. Mayor. I made the decision when there was only one city in the state of Ohio to bring forth legislation to ban texting while driving in the city of
And I
Cleveland.
supported that.
Well, but you just said I didn't have to make a decision.
I-
I made that decision,
I
and
support
it helped save lives, and
I
it continues.
support that.
And 2 years later, after that, I made another decision to put legislation on the board that would ban the handheld cell phones while you drive down the street. So I made the decision.
And all that's nice.
I'm just going back, when you said I make
All
a
that's
decision.
nice.
I made a decision to continue to stay on that horse that finally got that football field built behind John Adams that helps our young people in sports, that helps our young people now have the ability to play in their own backyard, not have to be going around the city of Cleveland. So I've made decisions. I just haven't made a decision that I want to spend $2.4 million on a dirt bike track that 95% of the people in the city of Cleveland will not use.
All right, let's pivot here. The editorial board is a big fan of Eric Gordon. I think he's been the best leader we've had in the school for a long time. That hasn't been much of a discussion in this campaign, and we're looking to hear from each of you whether you would continue to support him or if you would be thinking that there is a change there, because that's something that voters would probably want to know.
Me or?
Either one.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I support the superintendent, Eric Gordon. We, however, do have some major issues that we still have to address, even though we've made significant improvement in some indicators on educational outcomes. We've done quite well in some areas. We still, as individual schools, we have some of the best in the state of Ohio. We've created a portfolio model that partners with high-performing charters and us that really is considered the most progressive in the country. We've done all that. We've even gone through some challenging times with the Cleveland Teachers Union around the reform, but at the end of the day, we've reached collective bargaining agreements. So in those sense, he's putting together those things that you need to put together in order for us to make the kind of progress we need to make in a more accelerated way. Where we are having a problem is that in two areas. One, I think in those children who have IEPs, and these are individual educational plans, and whether or not we're taking that information as we look at the individual child, and is the system serving them as an individual child to the best that they can as a system. You know, we still have to look at that. The investment schools, which were the worst schools, some have made some significant improvements, but they were so far behind, even if significant improvement keeps them ahead, right? So how do we ramp that up and create a better outcome for that? And then what we'll have not only the part that is doing well, we'll be working at both ends, and then you'll see the system moving much quicker. Now you have to remember, the reform has only been in place 5 years. It's only been in place 5 years, and in that 5 years, as I said, we made significant improvement in some areas, while we have not improved as well as we should in other areas. And now you have to take this in the context of understanding this is a decades with an S long problem.
Right.
And 5 years so yeah, I support the
So
super.
Mr. Reed, if you could
I don't
address-
think there's a need to change Eric Gordon at this particular time.
And what would your plan be for the future of the education system in Cleveland?
I think I didn't support the Cleveland plan in the first vote. I supported it the second time. There are improvements. We need to keep pushing forward.
And I don't believe the councilman supported, you're right, you didn't support the Cleveland plan, you didn't support the levy, you didn't.
I said I didn't support the plan the first time, the
Right.
levy the first time.
That's right.
The second time I did. And I support us continue to move forward.
What changed your mind?
Right. Good question.
Well, I mean, there were some things that I saw and some conversations with Eric Gordon and some teachers that said that things are not where we want them to be, but things are better. You know, I look at John Adams right now. You look at John Adams, it was a failing school. It was continuing to be a failing school. And now we put in Bard College there. And we also put in what I now talk about, sports management. Then I'll be meeting with Mr. Gilbert tomorrow to see if we can get the Sports Commission and John Adams to partner together to see if young people who can't throw a football, catch a baseball, or put a basketball into a rim, whether or not they can go into other activities at that school. And that was my idea, to say, hey, we need to think about, can they go into broadcasting? Can they go into medicine? Can they do other things in sports besides playing football? So now tomorrow, David Gilbert and I are gonna be meeting with the people at John Adams. So it's things like that said, hey, there's some innovation here. We got Bard College now. We all know what Bard College is, so that's coming to John Adams. So there were things that they convinced me that if we supported it the second time, that we would do on behalf of the, because you got to take into account, and I think you and you and Vosberg were at City Council when I was down there, and don't forget, I was the only councilman that supported issue 14, and I was a freshman. Why? Because I said our young people should not be in schools that are too hot in the summertime and too cold in the wintertime. Now look, every school in Ward 2, I think I'm the only councilman that can say this, every school in Ward 2 is brand spanking new. And only one of those schools is a passing school. So it's more than just making brand new schools that I advocated for on issue 14. We got to do more. And I think that they are trying to do more, and I'm willing to help them continue.
All right, I got one more issue I want to throw before Sharon takes it back. Mayor Jackson, we've been around a long time, and I can say concretely that there's been nobody who's had a worse record with public records, and even Mike White, who really didn't like us, made it a point to get records to us in a timely manner. It's been a problem, and as you know, we've got lawyers talking to your lawyers now because we're thinking of suing you. But it's not just records, it's transparency. When the issue with the airport director came up last week, we reached out to say, hey, we're on this, we're chasing this, it'd be nice to get in front of this, and everybody told us, you guys don't know what you're talking about, it didn't happen, there's no problem. We knew it happened, it did happen, and yet everybody we talked to, Dan Williams, Valerie, everybody said, you guys, you don't know what you're talking about, there's no there there.
There's no.
That he hadn't walked out of his office, that he hadn't cleaned out his photos, that he hadn't disappeared and created this huge mystery for the airport staff. We did everything possible to do that straight, and instead of getting transparency, we got stonewalled, which has been a pattern. What can you tell us for the next 4 years that's going to change? And then Mr. Reed, when he's finished, you can talk to us about your plan. This has been a problem. The media had not had the money to launch what is an expensive lawsuit. Now we have a First Amendment coalition. I think there will end up being a pretty serious lawsuit. This has been what we see as a major failing. What can you tell us that would change about that?
Well, if what I can tell you that whatever you're entitled to is what you should have, and you should have it in a timely manner according to the law. What you're saying is that it's not occurring. And there is some disagreement as to whether or not it's occurring in a timely manner, or whether or not there was even a request. To give you the example of the airport director, am I to call the airport director a liar when he says that all of the rumors, as you portrayed them to be, were incorrect, and to the point that we actually had, well, director, if why don't you just write him a letter or give him a statement personally saying that and answer his question, and he did. But so there was a disagreement as to whether or not something was factual or not. There was an assertion of a rumor, and when we investigated that rumor, the person, he said it does not exist. It is not factual. It didn't happen. So we said, well, tell him. Now, I don't know, I think that was a pretty quick turnaround, to be honest with you. I don't know what the transparency part of it is in terms of as if we were trying to conceal it, but it was a pretty good turnaround. I think it happened within a day or two, whatever it was. It was resolved in the week. I think it's very clear that the director said, and answered very specifically and clearly, that all of the rumors about where he was and what he had done was incorrect. And only thing I can do is accept what he said. Now that's on that. The process itself, in regards to it, is not. It needs some help. And a lot of it is centered on who gets the request, how quickly they send it to gather information, and then give it to law, how long it stays in law, and then when it comes out for review of what the final information would say, how long did they keep it before they actually release it? And that is far too long, in my opinion also. And because it is no longer even a story anymore, to be honest with you, and in not addressing it in a timely manner, all you do is feed the rumor, and you create issues that really are not necessarily there. So that part I do agree with, that it needs to be revamped and streamlined in a way that doesn't take the kind of time that it takes. It sits on too many desks. It has touched too many people. And it sits on too many desks for approval before it's finally released.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, a little pushback on that. I believe we had an eyewitness who took a look into the office and saw that pictures were down off the wall and things had been packed on the desk. We're not going to agree.
Well, we're not going to agree because I'm not going to call the director a liar when he says that's not the case. Because I asked him directly, are you leaving or not leaving? No, Mayor, I'm not leaving. We're in the middle of negotiation around this. We're doing that. Look, we're gonna do inline baggage, we're gonna be coming online, $20 million expenditures, we're doing that. We're working on our master lease in the next few years, we're trying to reduce employment. He gave me a litany of things. He talked about how we're trying to do a master plan on capital improvement to position the airport in terms of the terminal. It's the kind of conversation he was having with me. I did not go to his office and peep into it.
All right.
And so if somebody went to the office and peeped into it and informed of it, you know.
Had a snapshot in time there,
well,
but
fine,
we're gonna move
but,
on.
it
We
wasn't
wanted
me.
to ask
It
Mr.
wasn't-
Reed the same question.
Mr. Reed, what would transparency look like if you were mayor?
It's going to look totally different than what's been happening now. I constantly hear from the.
I would expect that to be the answer, but that's a good answer.
Well, I only say it because I hear it constantly. I mean, I hear it constantly and I see it constantly. I mean, you talk about the fact that, you know, when police officers are involved in some type of incident and we know the camera's there, why it takes us so long to see it from this administration. So it's gonna look totally different.
So are you saying that you would make things available?
We not only say we're gonna make things more available, if you remember the discussion on Public Square. On Public Square, I never said that we should not close it. What I said, we should have a conversation about it. Should have been an open conversation, that one man in one room, in one office, should not have had the opportunity to make that decision. So what have I said? And I've said it throughout the campaign trail. Every Saturday for at least 2 hours, not less, probably a heck of a whole lot more, we're gonna open up the mayor's office and let any citizen in the city of Cleveland come down and talk to the mayor. One-on-one. No appointment needed. Why? Because first of all, I did it when I first became a council person. Every Saturday, go to my office on 137 and Kinsman and open the door, return phone calls, do what I needed to do, and any citizen in Ward 2 who wanted to come, or at that time it was Ward 3, wanted to come and talk to their council person one-on-one, they knew they could do it. I think the same thing should hold true at the mayor's office. Why? Toby Cosgrove called the mayor on the phone and said, Mr. Mayor, I got something I need to talk to you about, the CEO of Cleveland Clinic. With or without an appointment, he could come see the mayor. If Beth Moody, head of Key Bank, wanted to come see the mayor, with or without an appointment, she could come see the mayor. Why can't Ms. Brown in Mount Pleasant? Why can't Mr. Smith in Collinwood? Why can't Ms. Jones over in West Park come see the mayor? I got a problem with my street light. I can't get my street light on. I've called the council person, I've called CPP, and I need the street light on. Why can't they come see the CEO in the city of Cleveland, top CEO in the city of Cleveland, and say, I've tried this, Mr. Mayor, it's just not working, the system's not working.
We're gonna stop you right there because I'm gonna ask for summaries from both of them, unless there are any other questions. You asked my last question, the one about public records, so.
I thought we had another half hour.
We do.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
please ask.
I actually did have one question. This has sort of to do with leadership issues, which you raised, Mr. Mayor, but, you know, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Reed has consistently brought up issues of public safety. He's done a white paper. He brought people to town to talk about it as a public health issue, found some eminent experts, and yet your administration was not represented at that conference. It seems that you say you personally do not dislike him, but that actually you segregated how you reacted to some of these important issues that he brought up, maybe because of not liking how he operated. I don't know, but do you feel? I mean, is that kind of a leadership failing that when somebody isn't perceived as loyal to you, you kind of segregate what they're trying to do, even if it might be for the benefit of the city?
No, it's not. If it were, no, that's not the case. We've done the same thing. We've done the same thing. We've held these conferences. We've done those kind of things. We brought in people. We've talked about violence being healthy. We brought on Dwayne Deskin. We've done, but we're in the implementation mode. We're not in the conversation mode. And so we do implementation, we execute on things, we're trying to do resolution of things. And so I don't know about this last conference you're speaking of. I know there are other conferences that we did have representatives at, but there may have been one or even two that we didn't have anybody at for whatever reason. I don't know. But I know that these issues are not new issues. We have done the same thing. We've drawn conclusions already, and that is why we're beginning to implement, and rather than to stay in perpetual discussion and conversation about something. You know, people write theses. People are very good at identifying problems, and they write papers, get PhDs on what the problems are, but they're not that good at actually doing anything about it. And so we've already identified that we have these problems, and now we're in the phases of trying to execute and to implement and to resolve. That's what we're doing. So it's not a matter of that's, to me, that's the leadership. There's no real leadership in having a good conversation about something. You know, if that were the case, I'd be a professor. Then I'd get paid for, and I would be then you can be the leader of the college or something like that, because that's what you're supposed to do. We're government. We're supposed to be in the resolution of things. And so I own those problems. I just don't identify them and talk about them. I own those problems.
Well, let me because it sounds all well and good, but you know, my mom comes from Missouri, and I always knew when we were in trouble. You know what she would say? You know where I come from. We say, yeah, you come from Missouri, and that's the show me state. So I can just tell you, he shows you his disdain and dislike for Zack Reed. When Mayor White, the 1 year that I served under Mayor White said, I can go into any neighborhood in the city of Cleveland, although some of those council people can't stand my guts. Why? Because I got something going on in every neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. That's what he said. So he understood, whether they like me or not, I have an obligation to every neighborhood, every person in that neighborhood. I'm gonna just tell you a small one. This is a small one of the disdain for this man towards me for whatever reason, because I've been loyal to him as a majority whip. I've supported him last year when he ran. But this year, you covered it, because I think I've talked to you on more than one occasion about family unity in the park. We took family unity in the park where one day I looked over the horizon at Lukista Park and said, you know what? One day we need to come here. I don't know what one day it's gonna be, but one day everybody needs to come to this park and see the beauty of this park. So we started family unity in the park. What is family unity in the park? That's the name, bringing families together and bringing a free group to there, national groups, so people who can't afford to come downtown and come to these other places can see this group in their own backyard and see fireworks. So what did I do 14 years ago? So we brought the Temptations, we brought the OJs, we brought Stephanie Mills, all these groups. They even say that ticket downtown would cost $75 to $100, and they get to see us for absolutely free. Every year, this administration and the past administration has given us money to help bring this on, because it's not my event, it's the community's event. It's a community event. This year, I couldn't get money out of this administration. How is it that for the last 11 years I've gotten money for this event? That's a community event. It's a family event. It has now grown, as you guys have said, it has grown to be one of the largest events in the city of Cleveland. People look forward to it. I can tell you in January, people are already asking me, who are you gonna bring this year? People are even this year. If I lose, as you know, it may not happen, but they're already saying, well, I've got this idea. Can you bring the barcades next year? And this year, the year I'm running against them, I couldn't get a donation from this administration. So that shows you, it goes back to what you say, it is the state. I don't know what it is. I like them, I respect them, I agree with them most of the times. We focus on the disagreements I have with him. We don't focus on the 90% of the time that I agree with him. So in this case, I'm glad you brought up that observation.
Now I have a leadership question for you.
Yeah.
So the school levy issue to me is a good example of this, where you did not support the initial most important vote on a school levy. The levy that is now being used to enhance police, to improve the building and housing department, and countless other purposes, including, street repair in your own ward, was made possible by a levy that we have a story that indicates you voted against putting it on the ballot, even if you later campaigned for it. The question these actions suggest to me, or the concern it suggests to me, is that it's easy to stand up in opposition when you don't have to make the hard choices. How can we be assured, because you don't have, as a ward councilman, we can't sort of see how you balance these competing issues. How can we be assured that you will correctly balance issues, that you will be willing to step forward to take leadership positions when it's necessary?
Well, I've taken leadership positions time and time again. So I don't think anybody in this room or anybody outside this room or anybody who's looking right now should question whether or not I'm going to take leadership roles, because I've taken those time and time again. I mean, on the issue of public safety, it's been one council person, and now, thank God, we have Jeff Johnson that continue to make this one of the single biggest issues in the city of Cleveland. Because you cannot move forward and create a better community without a safer community. So in that regards, no one's gonna have to worry about my leadership. When it looks at, I would look back and say that I know firsthand, I campaigned vigorously. My name's on literature for the increase from 2% to 2.5%. And in the first case of not voting for the levy, it was a simple one. And Bob just did another story. Leadership is somebody standing up to those people in Columbus and saying that on not one, not two, not three, but on 4 occasions, the highest court in this great state has ruled the way that we fund schools in the state of Ohio is unconstitutional. And we keep letting them off the hook. And as long as we keep letting them off the hook, we keep coming back to our people in our communities and asking them, can we raise your property tax so that we can fund the schools? That's what we keep doing. So now we've gotten to the point, you look at the citizen in West Park. Citizen in West Park pays much more property tax than most citizens in the whole Cuyahoga County. We're getting to a point because we are not standing up to those people in Columbus. We just did the story on nucleus. You can't keep shuffling this down the track. And I voted against it on principle that I'm tired of it. If I, the mayor, when the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio tells us to do something on residency, we had no recourse but to allow the citizens, the people who work for the city of Cleveland, not to live in the city of Cleveland. There was no remedy of saying, well, he didn't like it because he disagreed with it and I disagreed with it. But the highest court in the state of Ohio said they had the right to move out of the city. How is it that on more than one occasion, the most powerful court in the state has said the way that we're funding public schools is unconstitutional, and yet what is our remedy? Let's just go back to the poor citizen in Mount Pleasant or Collinwood or West Park and just get the money from them. Instead of going and get the money where the Supreme Court said we should have got the money from individuals who should be smart enough to get around the table and take this burden off of the 85-year-old lady who lives in West Park.
All right, let's hear from Mr. Jackson on that score about speaking up when Columbus takes away home rule and things like that.
And also, if you can address why you didn't donate to the party in the park this year.
Okay. Donate to the party in the park, I'll check. Where did you normally get it from?
It comes out of public utilities.
Utility? I'll check. I don't know. I really don't know. But in terms of the Supreme Court decision, if I'm in terms of school funding, is my understanding that they said that, the funding of it through property tax was probably not the best idea, but never required anybody to do anything about it. Again, that's part of this thing about pronouncing something and then there's no remedy and no actions associated with the pronouncement. They could have put teeth in it and said you have to do something and you have to do it by this time. I believe they failed to do that. So you know, that's the way that goes. But the other part of your question was what?
Oh, it was just about, basically, you know, he's accusing you and your administration of not standing up and being.
No, that is not true. That is not true. He has stood up on more than one occasion to
Oh,
those
the
people
home
in
rule.
Columbus
The
on
home
home
rule.
rule. He has stood up on more than one occasion on home rule.
But what happens is we sue them. Okay, let me just remind you of something. Let me just remind something.
Now, you know we agree on this, right?
Well, we do agree.
All
We
right.
do agree. That's why I can't disdain you. But
At this moment, or?
right, you know. So let me point out something. When this is the thing. I was a councilman. I passed anti-predatory lending law in Cleveland City Council. Of course, it wasn't cell phone law, but I passed anti-predatory lending law as a councilman in City Council. And when I became the council president, I ensured it went through. The state sued us, saying that we could not enforce that law or pass any other laws associated with lending practices. Well, of course, it proved that I was right. It proved that I was right. With the whole foreclosure crisis, predatory lending, financial collapse, I, as a councilman, I just don't talk about these things is my point I'm making to you. As a councilman, when we were talking about construction and the fact that that Clevelanders were not working on these construction sites, I worked with the building trades, and it took me over a year to deal with the anti-predatory lending. It took me over a year negotiating with the building trade to get what we now call the Fannie Lewis law. I was sued on that. Once it became, the thing was in operation for over a decade. It was working. But once now they're suing us, and it's in the state's court now as to whether or not we can enforce that. I'm just trying to tell you, I'm doing things. So leadership is your question. And so yes, when the state does something contrary to, on the thing around the residency, and they did not rule on home rule. They did not rule on home rule against us on residence. They used another provision in order to get around the home rule provision because they cannot get it. Home rule is in our favor. But they used another provision. Why? Because that's what they wanted to have done. And they ruled because they had an agreement with mainly public employees unions, particularly public safety, around eliminating the residency law. In Columbus, they ruled. We sued. We lost that in the Supreme Court. So I'm not hesitant on anything. Every time I take action, and this city takes action that has substance to it, not just I did this little thing or this little thing, but it has real substance to it. We run up against the system that says we will not allow this to happen. And we wind up in court. The same thing is occurring in many different, this home rule that I can just go on and on with guns. What was the first thing when we held a press conference when I was mayor, and when they passed a law around us not eliminating all of our gun laws, saying we could do nothing, right? And we said, we don't know when or where, but we guarantee that somebody's gonna die as a result of this, and our homicides, Councilman, would escalate as a result of this. And we went into court and sued, we lost.
And look at the leadership.
And look, well, no, hold on.
And look at the leadership.
The
And look at the
leadership, leadership.
And that's, because that's that question on leadership. Look at the leadership.
What is the
Look at the
leadership?
piece of legislation they brought forth. Legislation that
And he
said,
voted against it. Gun, the only thing, he voted against it. So all of this
So can I finish my can I finish my?
After I finish, you
Okay.
can. And all of this conversation around that, yes, we brought legislation forward. We brought legislation forward that was not a political piece of legislation that we could say, look what we've done, but legislation that we knew that the Supreme Court would have a difficult time overturning because it was in compliance with what it had said you had to do in regards to passing local laws. That is substantive. That is something that we did, and it votes against it.
And,
So you can't have it, you tell me you can't
Okay.
have it both
well, you
ways.
can't have it both ways. And
So
look,
you
first of
can't.
all, I will always vote against legislation that want to take guns out of good people's hands when bad people have guns. That's first and foremost. But I also will vote against and
I
bring
don't
up.
think that piece of legislation did that, and there's no one who is promoting anything to say that people who have a right to carry guns cannot carry guns. It is about responsible gun ownership.
So let's look at the piece of legislation they brought forth. In the haste to take guns out of good people's hands, they said that you cannot sell more than 2 or 3 guns in the city of Cleveland. We don't even sell guns. We don't have a gun place in the city of Cleveland. This is the haste. This is the leadership we're talking about. And I was one who brought that up. We don't even sell guns in the city of Cleveland. So how are you going to bring forth a piece of legislation? You know what it would hurt? It would hurt the IX Center. You see, this is the haste of this leadership.
Can I-
So,
Go
so,
ahead, I'm
so,
sorry.
Let me follow up on Sharon's earlier question, which is talk about leadership. When the $15 minimum wage issue came up on the council floor,
yes.
you got thunderous applause when you stood up and seemed to support putting it on the ballot, having it voted on. I mean, the whole city council chamber who was there and supported that erupted in support of you, and then when it came time for a vote, you voted against it. How do you explain that? I mean, you went for the grandstanding applause, but then you voted against it.
Okay, now, you know, I may take that from people who come to City Hall and on a regular basis and see what happens. As you know, it's about making sausage, okay? I said from the beginning that we should raise the minimum wage, okay? I said I didn't mind raising it to the $15 an hour. But from the beginning, I was against going from $8 to $15 an hour, period. That's what I said. So any thunderous applause that you may have heard or seen came from the fact that I supported the $15, but from the beginning, I've said it should be gradual. It should be gradual from the beginning. 8 to 10 to 12 to 15, and that's what I said. And that's the reason that I've said, as mayor of the city of Cleveland, one of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around the state of Ohio. Almost like in a whistle train stop thing that they used to do in the old days. And ask the people of the great state of Ohio, do you want to raise the minimum wage? And not only raise it overall, we need to look at it in geographical. Because we may be able to afford the $15 here in Cleveland, but the people in Appalachia probably can't do 15. But I still don't believe that people should be living off a minimum wage for the federal government or in the federal wage or what we have here in the state of Ohio. So any thunderous applause that came from me didn't come from 8 to 15. It came because I supported it, but I've always supported it being gradual, never 8 to 15,
Can I?
okay? So, but hold it, because
I'm
because
sorry.
there's one thing I want to make sure, because we have a tendency now during this campaign to say that, you know, I haven't done anything, okay? I've been a councilman that's done a heck of a whole lot. And on September the 12th, the people of Ward 2 must have rewarded me because I had done a heck of a whole lot. As the only elected official of 3 that was on that ballot, they got over 50% of in their ward who knows them best of what they've done. Of a person that has been the council person, the council president, and the mayor for 12 years, and they only needed to get 500 votes, and could not even get 500 votes to win their own ward. You can't go back and say there was 9 people. I had 9 people and had a heck of a whole lot more votes. So the people of Ward 2 who know me best rewarded me by over 53% of the votes on September the 12th. Why? Because I have done something. I have done something. You look at the aspect, when I first became councilman, I went to Mayor Michael White and said to the mayor, if I'm gonna change the face of Mount Pleasant, I gotta change Kinsman Road. So what did the mayor do? Showing leadership. $21 million came down for road improvement that year. He gave us $11 million to do Kinsman Road. And what did it do? Because I had a vision that if I just fixed Kinsman Road, it would spur economic development in my neighborhood. So what happened? The 3rd school built in the city of Cleveland under issue 14 was A.J. Rickoff on 146th Street. A new county building on 139th Street. A new senior building on 138th and Union. So we leveraged what $11 million to over $50 million because of me going to a mayor and saying, help me transform this neighborhood. So when someone tells you I haven't done anything, see, the thing we gotta understand is, over the 7 to 8 or 9 or 10, whatever you wanna call it, $1 billion that have been spent in the last decade under this administration, where's the leveraging back to our neighborhoods? Now, so when you talk about I haven't done anything, and then you look,
All right, hold on.
because it's,
Kind of gone into
Yeah,
the summary, so-
can we, can we, can,
I do think he wanted
well, yeah, because now I got 3 things to respond to, including the answer to a question that was never asked. So let's start off with the revisionist, the historical revisionist approach to life. You supported, you said you supported $15 minimum wage in Cleveland itself.
yes. I
That's
said
what
it.
you said.
Yes.
And you voted against it. So that's a fact. It's a fact, and I don't need to go any further than that. That's
Okay.
a fact. But let me also point out that, that another piece of legislation I did as a councilman, associated with this minimum wage stuff, we did the living wage. And we went from minimum wage then was around $5 and something, we went to $10. Now, we did not impose it on the private sector, but we imposed it on anybody who received a certain level of subsidy from us and on all of our employees. So we, in many cases, we doubled the pay of people who were working for us in a seasonal capacity, right? And that's not revisionism, Councilman. And then this thing about the honest gun owners. I think that was the phrase. Here's a man who talks about homicides. And he's criticizing us for passing legislation that he said would harm the IX Center. How would it harm the IX Center? Gun shows. Who will sell 25 guns if in fact you were willing to buy them with no federal licenses to have to do that because they say they're private owners of guns, good private owners of guns. How many of those guns on the streets of our city of Cleveland going to people who do not supposed to have guns who wind up committing homicide? A man who talks about public safety.
All right, we should
You
have
know,
3 minutes to summarize.
talks about public safety.
So why don't you each take 3 minutes to summarize what,
What's
Why-
all this
why-
about?
endorsement?
Yeah, that's right, why we should support it.
Now, who going first? You want me to go first?
Mr. Jackson.
Okay, all right. Well, let me start off by saying that contrary to a lot of conversation, is that I believe that Cleveland has a bright future. It has a good future. And that bright and good future we have the opportunity for that, not by accident. It just didn't fall out the sky that we have this opportunity. We have this opportunity because of work. the work that my administration has put in to get us to this point of having that opportunity to have a bright and a good future. Do we still have challenges? Of course we do. We're an urban center. As I like to say and say often, we're not Mayberry. We're not Pleasantville. We have challenges. But leadership is how you engage those challenges and how you own those challenges and how you deal with those challenges. And that's what we have done. And because we have done that through the Great Recession, through damaged relationship between police and the public without riots, going through the recession without bankruptcy, you know, we've dealt with those things. And we've dealt with it in a way that has caused people to have confidence in Cleveland and have confidence in Cleveland in a way that they're willing to invest in Cleveland to create the jobs that stop the bullets that he talked about. All right? And to create the kind of wealth that we need in order to grow this city. Do we have challenges? Yes, we do. And that is why we put together $65 million, because anytime you're doing something and anytime you're putting work in and anytime you're moving forward, it invariably, when you get to the end, that is when the most difficult challenges are there. They're there. And that's where Cleveland is. And in order for us to be that great city, then we have to get over those challenges in the same way that I've dealt with challenges in the past. And part of that is that $65 million focus in the most distressed areas of the city of Cleveland that will allow for us to underwrite and to help to encourage private investment in areas where normal and traditional investment models and tools simply just don't work.
Mr. Reed.
Well, first of all, I want to once again thank you for this opportunity to be here and have an opportunity to voice why I believe not only yourself should endorse me, but why the people of the city of Cleveland should vote me in as the mayor of the city of Cleveland. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, I just alluded to it just a minute ago. The fact that a man who's been the council person, the council president, and the mayor for 12 years could not get 50% of the people who should know them best to vote for him to be the next mayor of the city of Cleveland. With all that he just said, all you needed was 500 votes. That would have got you a majority in your own ward, because less than 900 people voted, a little over 900 people voted. Because they understand what I understand, that through it all, the quality of life for them hasn't gotten better. That the same problems that existed 12 years ago exist today. The poverty. The poverty that I read about every day in your newspaper. I read about it. Read about it again this morning. About the little girl who went into her mother's bedroom because her mom was crying feverishly because her dad had been shot. Why? Because he got out of jail and didn't do the right thing. And that's why we're talking to the people in Grafton right now about creating a pipeline for those people to get the education in Grafton to learn how to do things on housing, so when they come to Cleveland and we have the Buildings Future program, they can come right there so that little girl won't have to cry in their bedroom as they did today. And you read and you see it because it's in the front page here, cleveland.com. The poverty that has existed under this administration. Since they started, we've been 1, 2, or 3, and we never come off of that list. How do you justify that after you're now going around the city bragging about that we spent $7 to $8 billion when this poverty continues to exist? And we know the harmful effects of poverty. We read it through Mark right there and Layla over the last few. I called Mark a few Saturdays ago because after reading the article, I went out to Lakewood to talk to the lady that set up the boutique out there, because I wanted to talk to her firsthand and tell her help's on the way. Secondly, you look at the joblessness. Through it all, with all the millions upon billions of dollars that have been spent in the last 12 years under this administration, as we sit in this room today, the city of Cleveland, the metropolitan area for the city of Cleveland, is ranked the highest unemployed city in the entire nation, from Hawaii to Maine. How do you justify that? And then last but not least, violence. That under this administration, city of Cleveland, through championships and RNCs and new buildings continue to be one of the most dangerous cities in the entire nation. The most distressed city in the entire nation. So I'm asking you to endorse him the same way his people in his ward didn't endorse him, because they firmly believe it's time for a new mayor. It's time to move on. After 12 years, it's time to move into a new and different and better direction. A direction that says, like I say, that every ward can do this. That young people want this opportunity to move and see their wards better. They want to grow. They want to have their families right here in the city of Cleveland. So I'm asking you to do what these people are saying we want to do. 61% of the people in the city of Cleveland on September the 12th didn't vote for a 12-year incumbent, because it's time to move on. I've got a vision for the city. So when someone tells you in closing, I'll just give me 30 seconds. When someone tells you I haven't done anything, all you got to do is go back to my neighborhood. Go talk to the people in Warner, in Turney, in the Mill Creek Falls area. And they'll tell you what I've done in the last 8 years that they couldn't get done in so many years. New playgrounds, new roads, surveillance cameras, new houses. So I'm asking you to vote for the future, not the past.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.